Welcome everyone to my channel. Please don't forget to subscribe, share, and give this a thumbs up. Also, please don't forget to hit the notification bell so you'll know right when a new story is uploaded. Please enjoy the final part of this 4-part series as we get right into it. As I approached Zenik, the look on his face was downcast, sad, and a little hesitant. I approached him carefully as I don't know what his reason is for being here. I was concerned it was time to pay me back for our fight all those moons ago. He called out to me,
"Cyrus, my brother."
in a welcoming voice. I immediately felt relief when he opened his arms for an embrace. We put our hands on each other's shoulders and cried happy tears. I asked him why did he risk coming all this way to the forest of banishment. That's when he returned to looking sad. He told me that our father, Yunin, was injured and very sick from it. They were worried he would no longer be alive soon, and father requested to see me again. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I just stood there in shock. My father, who was so strong, vibrant, and formidable, was sick and dying. I knew this day would come, but just not so soon. There were so many moons spent away from my family, and so much they have missed out on. Pasha and Granan approached, and Zenik immediately got into a defensive stance. I told him it was okay, and he didn't need to worry. I introduced him to my mate and my son. Zenik was amazed at how I established a life here, and am even a father. This was his first time meeting his nephew, and he obviously loved the idea of being an uncle. Zenik stayed with us for 2 moons as we prepared ourselves for a return to my home territory. Pasha, Plina, Danik, Granan, and I make the journey back with Zenik to my place of birth, the mountains of cloud and trees. Little did we know that we were followed. As we made our way back to my old home territory, it occurred to me just how much has changed. Maybe it's me that has changed more than anyone else. I am very nervous to face my mother and father again after all these hundreds of moons that I have been away. What will they think of me? What will they think of Pasha, one born in banishment? What will they think of my son? These thoughts rolled through my mind as we approached the territory that has changed so little since I was last here. In the distance, I could see many of us gathered around smiling and welcoming me back. It actually felt good. Zenik went ahead of me up to the den of my mother and father. He went inside, and a few moments later, he and mother came out. I couldn't control my emotions, and neither could she. The last time I saw my mother, I looked at her as I was leaving in banishment and never said goodbye because I was ashamed. She came running right to me, wrapped her arms around me, and embraced me. I told her how sorry I was that I just left like that, and didn't even tell her how much I loved her. She said that she already knew, and that she kept in her heart that I didn't want to put her through more pain. I introduced Pasha to her, and she embraced her and said welcome to the family group. I told her about my son, and she just looked at Granan. She said he looked so much like my father. She grabbed him and lifted him up, spun him around while she embraced him. She fell instantly in love with her new grandson. Mother then said that my father wanted to see me, so her and Zenik moved away from the den and I went inside. There, laying on his bed of pine branches and long grass, was my once powerful leader, protector, and father. I could see how his injuries had made him weak, and he didn't have long. He woke up to see me standing there, and he reached his large hand out to me and said gently,
"My son."
I started to cry once again as he did. I dropped to my knees beside him and told him how stupid I was as a young one, and how sorry I was for what I did to the family and to the whole territory. He said he was once young and stupid, but learned many lessons, some the hard way. He had heard from the other males he assigned to keep track of me about all the things I had done, fighting enemies, bringing a measure of peace to somewhere as terrible as the forest of banishment, and starting my own family unit. He said he knew I had grown into a powerful male, and judging by the courage and heart I had shown, and determination to keep peace, I was far more powerful than he ever was. He and the other older males agreed that I was the one that would change our species for the better, and I should become the next leader of the territory. I was in shock. "But Zenik is older and next in line to be leader," I responded. He said that Zenik lacked the vision and ability and was too free-spirited to make a good leader. It was already agreed on by the older males that I would become leader if I agreed. I said okay. Just then, Zenik rushed into the den angrier than I have ever seen him. I knew he must have been listening to what Father was saying to me. He grabbed me by the neck and roared at me. He said he will fight me to the death before he allows me to be a leader over him. He immediately challenged me in front of Father, but Father yelled that as long as he was alive, there would be no fight between us. Zenik got so enraged that he stormed out of the den and ran off into the forest. I knew I would have to face him because my brother has never made an empty threat. Father asked if my maid and son were here, and I told him that they were. Pasha and Granan were brought into the den, and Father's face softened as he smiled. He embraced Pasha and said, "Welcome, my daughter." He then looked at Granan and said he was going to grow up and become a leader just like him. He was clearly so proud to have a grandson. I've never seen my father so genuine and gentle. We spent many moons together there catching up, and Pasha and Granan getting to know my mother and father. There were now a couple of other young ones near Granan's age, and he was able to make friends with them. One night, about 20 moons after we returned there, Granan spent the night with one of the younger males so they could experience a night of play hunting and foraging to hone their skills and have fun. About halfway through the night, I woke up immediately at the sound of something. I couldn't figure out what it was. It was now totally silent. I thought it was strange that there was total silence. I assumed I would hear Granan and his friend in the distance rummaging around and laughing as I had heard for the first part of the night. I quietly got out of our den and went to the den of the family group of the other young one. The father woke up at the sound of me approaching. He came out asking why I was awake and coming to his den. I asked if he heard or knew where Granan and his son were. He seemed confused and said his son returned to the den a little bit ago and is asleep. I asked for confirmation, and he let me quietly lean in to see his son and mate sleeping. I told him that Granan was not in our den, and I heard a noise that woke me up, and now there is silence where they were once playing. He immediately became concerned, as was I. I told him to stay here and keep watch over the whole group area, and signal me if Granan returned. I also told him not to wake anyone up just yet. He agreed. I made my way the 30 paces to where they had made their bedding, and there was no sign of Granan. All I could see was by moonlight, so it was difficult. I could smell Granan's scent, but he was nowhere. As I started walking deeper into the forest, I was overcome by dread and fear the moment I picked up another scent. It was the scent of Cougar. My eyes grew wide open as I remember that day when the Cougars menaced me at my den. They said that there would be no trouble that night. They never said they wouldn't return or leave us alone. Could it be that they followed us all the way here? But why? Revenge over Zenik? Could they be trying to start a battle between the Cougars and our species? It wouldn't be much of a battle, but we could still lose some males in the process. I knew I had to find my son and hold these Cougars responsible before things get out of hand. There was no time to waste. I couldn't risk losing the scent trail just to go back for help. I went ahead in a full run to find my son. I ran about 100 paces when I stopped in my tracks. On a branch in front of me was fresh blood dripping off of it. My heart sank at the thought of what could be happening to my young one. He is not strong enough for one cougar yet, much less two of them. Just as I was examining the blood, I heard a muffled cry in the distance, followed by a growl. I knew it was them. I raced full speed towards the sound. There, about 50 paces ahead, was Granan, barely conscious, and the two cougars dragging him. I yelled out a battle cry, and the cougars dropped him and turned around. I screamed to let go of my son. The larger one screamed back at me, "Take something from us, and we take something from you, law of the forest." I stopped right in front of him, as he was between me and Granan, and the other cougar put his mouth on Granan's throat. I simply said, "It's not the law today." He lunged at me, and I grabbed him right in the mouth and neck, and in my anger, I instantly ended his life right then and there and threw him to the side. The other cougar started to bite down on Granan's neck. I was too far away to stop him before he could end Granan. I knew I was about to lose my son. Suddenly, before I could even finish my thoughts, a branch with a sharpened point flew right past me and plunged into the cougar's side, ripping him off Granan and pinning him to the ground, ending his life almost instantly. I froze in amazement that it was all over. I turned around to see who threw that branch, and to my utter shock, it was my mother. She looked in my eyes and said, "I lost my son once, but I got him back. I will not lose my grandson." I ran right to Granan and picked him up, and we both ran all the way back to the family group. Pasha was awakened by us returning. So were the rest of the groups. She immediately yelled out in emotional pain and grabbed Granan from me, and her mother Plina, and my mother went right into our den and got roots and leaves to treat Granan. Father heard what happened and called me to his den. He commended me for my swift response and for saving my son. He warned me, though, now to be prepared that the rogue cougars might incite other species to start a confrontation with us. Little did I know that warning would become reality. Many moons passed, and Granan made a full recovery. Father's life ended shortly after that event, and we mourned him for 10 moons. Zenik never returned, even though the news was sent to him. Life was now getting into a good routine for us and getting used to the new normal. I am leader of the territory now, and there is much responsibility. I never knew how much my father did and how much he sacrificed until now. Even though I am still the smallest of all the males, they all respect me as a leader and male. One day, I was walking through the forest with my mother, and we came across an old human dwelling with their signs on it. I recognized one of the signs and told my mother that I've seen this before, but didn't know where. She kept quiet. I then asked her about why Father got so upset with me all those moons ago when I saved those humans from the cougar. I could understand some of what the humans said, and I could read some of what they wrote. I asked her how could I understand, but it seems no one else in our species can. She looked down, took a deep breath, and said, "Maybe it's time you know." "Know what?" She looked at me and said that we need to sit down. The next moments that passed left me in disbelief, anger, gratefulness, and confusion. She said that when I was only 20 moons old, many humans with outer skins that looked like leaves and with metal weapons came through the forest and found us sleeping in our den. They woke up the whole family group. There was a fight immediately, and we tried to run. They saw me running with you, and several of them trapped us from the front and side. Your father, along with many others, were bitten by their metal weapons. He was down and fighting to keep the humans off of us, and others. I was bitten by one of the metal weapons, but it looked like a flower where it bit me. All I remember about that moment was getting very sleepy and a human taking you out of my arms. They got another young one too, and then the remaining humans got into the rolling cages and ran away very fast. The next morning I woke up to find you gone and several others no longer alive. Some humans were injured, but they all got away. Your father woke up from his injuries to find out you and another were taken. He cried out louder than I've ever heard a male cry. He vowed to find you and get you back. He knew that the humans would be ready for him, and he needed to find you quickly and swiftly. He sent a message to males from other territories to tell them what happened. And before darkness, over a dozen hunting males came to help us find you and the other young one. Your father didn't even care that he was injured. He only cared that you were gone. A few of the visiting males stayed behind to watch over the remaining group, and several unharmed or barely injured males and the rest of the hunting males set out to find you. They searched for you for 4 moons and would find your scent here and there. They were ready to call it off and return back, but your father refused to stop. He told the rest to go back and regroup and protect the family groups, and he would continue alone. He refused to accept you were gone. He stayed out there looking for you for over 50 more moons. He finally picked up your scent and knew you were still far away. He kept following it until he found many large human shelters with many humans moving around between shelters. He immediately left there and went down to the closest river and bathed himself, covered himself in mud so that humans couldn't smell his scent. He went back and watched them for several moons to study their pattern. He knew he was no match for that many humans with metal weapons, even though he was in his prime as a powerful male. He saw them leading you around with vines tied to you and vines pierced into your arms. He had no idea what they were doing to you or how hurt you were. He saw them put you into another shelter and they left you there alone. He knew this was his chance. He went to the back of the shelter and ripped it open. There you were, tied with vines. On the wall of the shelter was human writing, and he could hear human communication coming from somewhere, but didn't see any humans. It was so confusing what was happening. Your fingers had human paint on them, and human tools were all around you. You were writing human. As soon as your father got the vines off of you, humans opened the shelter and screamed. He grabbed you and tore you from the shelter and ran as fast as he could while holding you tight. Many humans came running and using their metal weapons to bite him, but he got away. He ran down to the river and ran along it in the water so the humans couldn't find his trail or scent. He ran without stopping for 2 moons to get you back here. He let out a yell for me from a distance, and I could tell he had found you. I, along with many others, ran down to him and grabbed you from his arms. You were barely alive. I don't know what the humans did to you, but they almost ended you. You were much stronger than the other young one they took. Your father never even saw or smelled him at all. He fell to the ground from running so long, and a few males picked him up and carried him to the den. We had many moons tending to you and your father to get you both back healthy. You were only 80 moons old, and I almost lost you. I understood now why Mother followed me when Granan was taken, and without thinking, she took action to help me save my son. She knew what I was feeling, and this time she had the power to stop it. So that's why I can understand some human communication. She said yes. They must have been trying to teach me human. But why? I asked. Her and Father could not understand why. That sealed Father's determination that humans must be avoided at all costs. So the many moons that followed, I was retaught how to be one of us. Some things I remembered from the humans, but most I didn't remember. I just sat there absorbing what she was telling me. That explains several things. How I could make fire and no one else could. Why I could understand some what humans say and write. Maybe that's why I was smaller than the rest of the males. Armed with this knowledge, I was determined to be very careful of humans. Some I had met were not bad, but many, it appears, actually were. We returned back to the group just before dark. Pasha came up to me and said that someone from the Forest of Banishment was here to see me. I was obviously concerned. She said to come and see who it was and why they were here. I get to the meeting tree where the visitor was taken, and some of the older males were there waiting. As I approached, I was taken aback somewhat. It was a young female. She asked, "Are you Cyrus?" I said I was. She said that she knew she would find me. She couldn't have been more than 250 moons old, though. She seemed somewhat familiar, but I knew I'd never seen this young one before. I asked her where her mother and father were. She said she never knew her mother, and her father was no longer alive. I asked her who her father was. I was not prepared for her answer. To my great surprise and disbelief, she said her father's name was Thadden. I knew she looked familiar, but I never expected that. She said her name was Alna. She told me about how much her father talked about me and how much he enjoyed his young times with me. I turned away from her because I got emotional at hearing about Thadden again. She apologized for talking too much, but I told her it was okay. I asked her why she came, and she said it was because she had no one and had been searching alone to find father's friend, Cyrus. I just couldn't believe it. She asked if it was okay to stay outside the family dwelling land so she could be near us. I said no. She would not be allowed to dwell near us. She put her head down and sighed. I told her that Thadden was like my brother, and since she was his daughter, she would be cared for as my own daughter now. No daughter of mine would be dwelling outside the family group. She would live with us in our family group as one of us. She smiled very large and ran and embraced me. The other males nodded with approval, and we walked back together. We got back to the den, and Pasha accepted her with open arms, as did my mother and the rest of the family groups. I felt it was my privilege to care for Thadden's daughter and give her the life he couldn't, because he gave his life to save me. It was a little difficult at first, because she was so used to surviving alone. But we got things worked out. Many moons passed with relative peace in our territory. I got reports occasionally of humans not far away that seemed to be wandering. I knew we needed to keep hidden, so all of our family groups went deeper into the forest and set up new dens farther away and up the mountain we dwelled in. We stayed safe by doing that a few times. One morning, one of the males came running to my den. He said that Zenik was not far away and had others with him. I immediately got out of the den and gathered all the males together at the meeting tree. I told them we must be as peaceable as possible because he was my brother and we don't need a battle. One of the males reminded me that Zenik challenged me to the death and he might be coming to initiate that fight. I knew it could be, but I hoped for the best. I instructed a dozen males to return immediately to the dens and keep watch over them right now. The other males were to stay here in case Zenik came here. In the distance, while we were still at the meeting tree, I heard Zenik yell my name to come out and meet him. I told the remaining males to stay here while I went to see what was to come of this meeting. I go about 200 paces to where Zenik was, and he was standing on a rock, holding a sharpened branch. He yelled that he was here to reclaim leadership of the territory, and since everyone supported Father's decision, he brought new residents with him to rule over. That's when I noticed, coming around from behind him and to the side of me, numerous rogue creatures. Some I had seen in the forest of banishment, and others I had not. There were black bears, hogs, and cougars among others. All of a sudden, from the dens, I heard a female scream. I looked back, and the rest of the males were running from the meeting tree back towards the dens. I heard more screams and bear cries and cougar cries coming from the direction of the dens. I started hearing battle cries from some of the males just moments after. I looked back at Zenik and yelled, "What have you done?" He replied without any emotion,
And so it begins.
He lifted the branch in his hand and let out a battle cry as the rogue animals charged at me. There were about 20 of them besides Zenik. He stayed there on the rock as the animals got to me. I jumped into a nearby tree and ripped off a branch and dropped back to the ground and started fighting. One by one, I had to end their lives just to keep my life from ending. I had to throw cougars off me and slam hogs into trees and kick black bears in the face. I used the branch to knock several out and end numerous others. Every hit I landed, I was bitten or scratched. Pasha came running toward me with Granan and Alna right behind her. She immediately came to a stop when she saw me being sieged by so many animals. She told Granan and Alna to climb into a tree and not to come down for any reason. She ran right up to me and ripped a cougar off me and ended it. She helped me get control, and the rest of the creatures took off running toward Zenik. Zenik laughed and said now it was time to fight him. I was now so tired and weak from fighting. Pasha said that there were hundreds of animals at the dens, and all the males and females were being overwhelmed fighting them all. I looked at Zenik and told him how wrong this was. In his rage and determination to get even and dominate me, he didn't care what havoc he brought to the whole territory. He dropped down off the rock and came towards me. Pasha tried to reason with him, but he told her to get out of the way. She refused because she told him this was madness. He took the branch he had and struck her and threw her to the side. Rage boiled inside me. Rage like I hadn't felt since that day at the meeting tree when I knocked him unconscious so long ago. I mustered up all the strength I had and started fighting him. I grabbed the branch he had and broke it so he couldn't use it as a weapon. He wrapped his arms around me and squeezed to try and break me. I slipped out of his arms and hit him several times in his stomach. He then took his fists and hit me square on the back and knocked me right to the ground. He kicked me in the face so hard, and I rolled almost one entire pace. Granan screamed out of fear and yelled for Uncle Zenik to stop. Zenik didn't listen. He jumped over on top of me and started hitting me over and over. I was able to hit him a few times, but Zenik was quickly overpowering me. Pasha had run back to the tree and gotten the young ones down and ran off to hide them to keep them safe. I was alone with Zenik, and he had the clear intent to end me. Or so I thought. After one particularly hard hit to my face, I open my eyes and see a male running up to us, holding not a branch, but a small whole tree. As he got close, my battered eyes could make out that it was none other than Danik, Pasha's younger brother. He was becoming a powerful male, was nearly 700 moons old, and was proving himself to be quite valuable. He let out a yell, and Zenik immediately looked around his shoulder. With full force and full motion, Danik swung the tree and broke it in two across Zenik's face. It was so hard that Zenik spun off of me and rolled almost 2 full paces before stopping. He was severely injured from it. Danik grabbed my hand and helped me up and said, "I thought you might need some help, Cyrus." I grabbed his shoulder and thanked him. I looked at Zenik and then back at Danik. I knew what needed to be done, and so did Danik. He handed me one of the broken halves of the tree. I knew for the safety of my family, the group, the territory, and even for our species, Zenik had to be ended. I went up to him and lifted the tree in the air. Zenik looked at me with fear in his eyes and the look of just do it. I slammed that tree down harder than I've ever slammed something into the ground, beside Zenik's head. He flinched and slowly opened his eyes to me standing over him. I said, "You are banished from this territory, and if you ever come back, I will finish this fight." He scowled and unsteadily got up and slowly limped into the forest, disappearing into the thickness. Danik put his hand on my shoulder and said in a very calm voice that I made the right decision because he was my brother. We returned back to the dens and found we sustained significant damage and injuries. 2 of the older males and their mates' lives were ended, as well as 3 young ones. It was a dark time for us. If only I could have seen this coming. I knew Zenik had hatred for me, and I had enemies out there. I wish I could have done more to save those fallen. The banished animals took off running away just moments before Danik left to come to my aid, so now they were nowhere in sight. We regrouped, and those of us capable stayed vigilant in case they returned. Over time, we recovered as a family group and territory group. What happened forever changed the paths of our lives. We grew from it. It was a lesson my son would need as he grew up and would eventually take my place as leader. We would soon face events as a group that we would have never imagined. Only time would tell how long we would stay safe and hidden from outside threats. We found out all too quickly how misplaced trust can change life forever. Thank you for watching this video. For those of you that made it to the end, I have something special for you. Be on the lookout for part 2 of the Lost in the Woods story. Also, I will be compiling the original Lost in the Woods story, all 4 episodes of Cyrus with never-before-heard materials added in, the part 2 to the Lost in the Woods story, and a special bonus story at the end of that, all in order for you to listen to straight through. Also, I will be writing special stories about the lives of Thadden, Cyrus' father Yunan, Pasha, and a continuing series that I will keep secret until it's finished. Many exciting things are yet to come, so please spread the word and let ones know that you might think will enjoy this channel. I'll catch everyone in the next video.